I never imagined I would be sleeping on the pavement of our own driveway, the soft glow of a street lamp painting long, wavering shadows across the hood of my car. But that was before tonight. Before I found out that the man I married not only believed his affair partner deserved the warmth of our home more than I did, but that he also thought he could command me like a submissive houseguest. My name is Marisol Hartwell, and this is where my story begins. The evening air had been unseasonably cool for late May, the scent of jasmine drifting through the open front window of the house where I had lived for nearly 5 years. As I finished preparing dinner, herbs simmering in olive oil, a crisp arugula salad tossed with lemon, I heard the low hum of my husband's car pulling into the driveway. At 6 feet tall and a lean build, I expected him to walk through the front door any second. Instead, I saw him stride past the living room window toward the back door. My heart fluttered. That was odd. He always greeted me first thing. When I followed him into the kitchen, my knife paused mid-chop. He stood leaning against the counter, arms folded. His dark eyes were sharp, a glint of cold humor playing at his lips. "Finish up," he said, nodding toward the stove. "I've got plans tonight." "Plans?" I echoed, placing the knife on the counter and wiping my hands on a towel. "I thought you had that networking event with the firm?" He shook his head. "Got canceled, but Jess said she's free now." I swallowed hard. Jess. His affair partner's name, 3 syllables that tasted like betrayal on my tongue. I felt the room tilt. "You invited her over?" I managed, voice steady even though my pulse thundered in my ears. "As a matter of fact, I did," he replied, turning to pull something out of his jacket pocket. A slim envelope, white, nonchalantly tossed onto the counter before he strode past me into the living room. My chest compressed. I remembered every baby step we had taken together, buying our first home, planning vacations, late-night talks about starting a family. And now, in the space of a breath, he discarded me for another woman's company. Didn't care that I was standing there unraveling. It wasn't the betrayal itself, though that cut deep, but the insult that followed. Once Jess arrived, an hour later, slinking through the door dressed in satin and laughter, he looked toward me without so much as an apology. He gestured at the front door. "Marisol, the driveway is soft at night. You'll sleep in the car." Her giggle echoed as I stepped aside. She drifted past me, brushing against my arm as she made herself at home. I felt hollow, as if the core of my world had dissolved. One moment, I was the woman who shared his bed. The next, I was a discarded accessory, replaced by someone younger, more daring. My breath caught, and I stumbled into the hallway. Objects blurred, a framed photo of us at a gala, the vase of flowers I'd placed on the console. Everything became static and flat. I realized he wouldn't notice if I disappeared. At that moment, I didn't even care if he noticed. Instead, I did what any self-respecting person would do when shoved aside like yesterday's trash. I walked to the driveway, unlocked my car, and slid behind the wheel. My hands trembled so badly I could hardly start the engine. The car roared to life as if to protest the injustice. I sank against the headrest, heated tears burning my cheeks, and watched the house's windows glow, oblivious. I sat there for what felt like hours. Every so often, I heard his voice through the open window, soft laughter, the clink of wine glasses, Jess's cooing, her expectation of comfort. It fanned the flames of rage inside me, fury not at him, but at the ridiculous situation. I knew that car like the back of my hand. It was my car, purchased, insured, and gleaming under 2 years of dedicated payment. He had no right to dictate where I slept. The thought brought a slight, fierce chuckle from my lips. Then came the memory that stopped me cold. Almost 3 years ago, I had signed the final papers. The car, a cherry red sport coupe, had been my dream, and I insisted it be under my name. He had scoffed at the idea of a woman owning such a thing outright. But I insisted. The dealership manager practically applauded when I handed over the down payment from my savings, and I walked out with the keys to a future I thought I shared. Tonight, that same piece of paper, the title, became my greatest weapon. I sat bolt upright, adrenaline surging. He wanted me sleeping in the car? Fine. I would make sure he regretted underestimating me. As the laughter and clinking drifted through the walls, I envisioned standing in that living room at dawn, holding the title aloft like a banner. Did he think he could control me? That the ownership of our life together gave him the power to exile me? Not a chance. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend of mine, Mark Donovan, the private investigator I once hired when I suspected a different betrayal. The text was brief but loaded. Be at my driveway at sunrise, and come alone. Within seconds, I saw his read receipt pop up. That was enough. I leaned back, hands tightening on the steering wheel, and I sensed the first glimmer of resolve coursing through my veins. I would not be the woman forced to sleep in her own driveway. In fact, I wasn't even sure I belonged there anymore. As the night deepened, I began to plan. I pictured soft sheets, not the vinyl seat beneath me. I saw the soft morning light catching the polished chrome of the car I owned, parked proudly in our driveway. I imagined confronting him with the title, demanding my respect, reclaiming my life. A sharp knock on the window made me start. I jerked forward, heart pumping. Through the windshield, I saw the silhouette of a tall man. My breath caught. It wasn't Mark yet. Someone else. Jess, perhaps, going to retrieve a forgotten scarf? No, too tall and broad. I switched on the overhead dome light. The figure disappeared at the edge of the glow. My pulse galloped. I reached for the door handle, but before I could pull it open, the figure reappeared at the passenger side. A tall, elegant woman stood there, her features sharp in the car's dim light. Cool blue eyes, long brunette hair pulled into a neat bun, a crisp trench coat framing her lithe frame. She raised one eyebrow. "Marisol," I heard her voice, low and unhurried. I froze. Her voice, velvety, measured, carried a familiarity that made my blood run cold. "Did you think you could hide in here all night?" A deafening realization struck me. She knew me. Who are you?" I croaked, trying to summon courage. She smiled then, a slow, knowing curve of her lips. "I'm the one who owns this car." She tapped the passenger window. "And you've got exactly 3 minutes before you're trespassing on private property." My mind raced. Trespassing? Private property? But I... She placed a single finger against her lips. "Listen, Marisol," she whispered, stepping closer so I could see the hint of recognition in her eyes. "We need to talk." And just like that, the night shifted on its axis. The betrayal of my husband was heavy, but this unexpected confrontation pulled me from despair into the swirling possibilities of a new battle. A battle I hadn't seen coming. I didn't know her name, I didn't know her intentions, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I had trusted the wrong man, and I had no idea how deep this web went. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The woman's shadow stretched across my lap like an accusation, her slender finger still pressed to the glass as if she could silence the night itself. I stared at her, my heartbeat pounding against my ribs like a drum caught in a storm. For a moment, I wondered if I was dreaming, if this was some strange manifestation of my exhausted mind, punishing me for letting my husband humiliate me so easily. But when she knocked again, this time softer, almost polite, I knew she was real. I cracked the passenger window just enough for her words to slip through. "You heard me, Marisol. Get out of the car." My name in her mouth felt oddly intimate. I hadn't told her who I was. She knew far too much. But the part that rattled me most was her voice. Calm, authoritative, yet patient, like she'd been rehearsing this moment for years. "Why?" I whispered, though the question tasted weak even as I asked it. "Because the driveway isn't yours. The car isn't yours. Not tonight." That jolted me upright. My spine pressed into the seat. "You're lying. I paid for this car. It's in my name." She tilted her head. "Is it?" "Titles can be transferred, Marisol. Agreements can be signed when you're not paying attention. You're not the only one who can plan ahead." Her words cut through my confusion like a blade. My husband's snide grin when he tossed that envelope on the counter flashed through my mind. He'd seemed so smug, so certain. What had he done? I pushed the door open so hard it swung back against the frame. The woman didn't flinch. Up close, her features were even more striking. High cheekbones, eyes like frost but no malice in them, just relentless certainty. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping out so quickly I stumbled against her. She caught me by the elbow, steadied me like we were dance partners instead of strangers at war. "Call me Rowan." She said it like an afterthought, as if her name was the least important thing about her. I tried to pull my arm back, but she held me just long enough to make her point. "Rowan who?" She let go, adjusting the collar of her trench coat as though she'd caught a whiff of something unpleasant inside the car. "Doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand the reality of tonight, your husband." "Ex-husband," I snapped. The word fell out before I even knew I was ready to say it. Maybe I wasn't. But it felt like armor. Rowan's lips quirked up at the corner, approving. "Good. Ex-husband then. He's in over his head. He sold you out, Marisol. And I'm here to collect." I swayed, half from the cold night breeze, half from the revelation that he'd done more than betray me with another woman. He'd sold me out. The words spun in my brain like a cruel echo. Rowan glanced at the house, her expression neutral. Through the curtains, I could see him and Jess draped across our couch, wine glasses clinking, oblivious to the slow ruin seeping into their haven. I wondered if they'd even noticed I was gone. "What do you mean, collect?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Rowan pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket, flicked it open, and held it under the dome light above my driveway. It was crisp, fresh. Not the worn title I'd kept in my safe. This was something else. It was a contract. My name was there, yes, but so was my husband's. Or rather, his signature, scrawled in that arrogant, careless way he'd always signed everything he thought beneath his notice. But what made my stomach drop was the line at the bottom. Transfer of full vehicle ownership to Rowan Whitlock in the event of outstanding debts or collateral default. I scanned the rest. Terms, conditions, a date. 3 weeks ago. He used the car, my car, as collateral? Rowan nodded once, and then he defaulted. So now it's mine. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? If you're here to take it, drive off. But don't stand here acting like you care. She didn't flinch. I do care. Because I don't want the car, Marisol. I want you to understand the mess you're standing in. The man inside that house has made promises to people he shouldn't. He's lied, forged, borrowed. And the only reason you're not drowning with him is because you're too stubborn to let him sign away what he doesn't own. But he did. And you're caught in the middle. The cold seeped through my thin sweater. My teeth began to chatter. What do you want from me? Rowan smiled, but it wasn't cruel. I want you to wake up, and I want you to help me bring him down. I laughed then, a short, sharp bark that made Rowan raise an eyebrow. You think I owe you that? She shrugged. You don't owe me a thing. But you owe yourself better than this. Come on, Marisol. Do you really want to be the woman who slept in her own driveway while your ex laughs with his mistress inside? Something in me, something that had been flickering for weeks, maybe months, snapped into a tiny flame. I stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something crisp and clean like pine needles after rain. What's your plan? I asked. Rowan glanced at the house again, then back at me. First, we take the car. Legally, it's mine. Tomorrow, when he wakes up to find it gone, he'll panic. He'll think you did it. He'll confront you. You don't deny it. You lean in. You push every button he has. Get him to admit what he's done, how deep he's in. Meanwhile, I pull the threads on his debts, his forged contracts, everything he's hiding. I blinked. Why not just tell the police? Her mouth twisted. Because men like him always slip through, we're not giving him the chance. I considered her for a long moment. The woman in the car's reflection didn't look like the one who'd chopped herbs for dinner a few hours ago. She looked raw, stripped to the bone, but standing. Still standing. Fine, I said, take the car, but I'm coming with you. Rowan's smile, for the first time, looked almost warm. I was hoping you'd say that. She gestured to the driver's side. Keys? I hesitated, then I pulled them from my pocket and dropped them into her outstretched palm. It felt like handing over a piece of myself. But when Rowan opened the door for me, motioning for me to sit in the passenger seat. I realized I hadn't lost something. I'd traded it for a chance at revenge. The engine hummed to life under her touch, smooth, confident. As she pulled out of the driveway, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror, the warm glow of betrayal receding like a bad dream. "Where are we going?" I asked. Rowan glanced at me, then back at the road. "To my safe house. You need to see just how deep this goes. And tomorrow, you'll play your part. Think you're up for it?" I stared at my reflection in the window. I didn't look like the woman who used to apologize for everything. I looked like someone ready to burn her old life to the ground. "Try me," I said. Rowan laughed, and the sound was sharper than the wind whipping through the cracked window. "Good. We'll make him wish he'd never told you to sleep in the car." And as the streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and shadows behind us, I knew one thing for certain. By the time this was over, he'd regret every last lie. To be continued. The hum of the car beneath us felt like the pulse of a secret we were both keeping alive. I leaned my forehead against the cold window, watching streetlights slip by in soft smears of orange and white. In the driver's seat, Rowan handled the wheel like it was an extension of her body. Calm, precise, never once glancing down to second-guess herself. I wondered if I'd ever feel that sure again. "Where exactly is this safe house?" I asked finally, my voice cracking the fragile silence between us. "About 30 miles west, near the old industrial district. Out of sight, out of mind," Rowan said, flicking on the blinker. She never took her eyes off the road, but I could see the faintest smile tugging at the corner of her lips when she added, "You'll like it. It's not much to look at, but no one asks questions there." It struck me then how little I knew about her. She'd appeared out of nowhere, her presence slicing through the numbness that had wrapped around me like a shroud. I should have been terrified. And I was. But it was a new kind of fear, a sharper one, something that kept my mind clear instead of dull. "Why do you care what happens to him?" I asked, shifting to face her more fully. The streetlights cast shifting shadows across her face, making her expression hard to pin down. She exhaled, a low sound that almost turned into a laugh. "Care? I don't care about him. I care about the mess he's made, and who gets pulled under when the floor gives way. People like me," I said. Rowan's eyes flicked to me, quick and assessing, then back to the road. "People like you. People who don't realize how much power they've been giving away, piece by piece." I wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't know me, but the words caught in my throat because deep down I knew she was right. Somewhere along the line, I'd let myself become an accessory in my own life. The faithful wife, the good hostess, the silent partner. I'd traded my instincts for compromise, my dreams for the comfort of predictability. And in the end, I was the one left on the driveway with the engine idling and nowhere to go. We fell quiet again. The city lights faded behind us, replaced by long stretches of empty road and darkened warehouses crouched along the horizon. It felt like driving out of my old life in slow motion. Rowan finally turned down a narrow side street lined with crumbling brick buildings. She pulled the car into a loading dock tucked between two faded warehouses, then killed the engine. For a second, the sudden silence pressed on my ears so hard I winced. "We're here," she said, as if that were explanation enough. I stepped out onto cracked concrete, hugging my arms around myself. The building looming over us looked abandoned, the windows dark and the paint peeling away like old scabs. But when Rowan unlocked a side door and led me inside, I realized how much the outside lied. The interior was warm, not cozy exactly, but functional in a way that made me feel oddly safe. A battered leather couch sat against one wall, next to a scarred wooden table covered in maps and papers. A single lamp cast a pool of golden light that felt like a haven in the middle of the storm. Rowan dropped my car keys on the table, then shrugged out of her trench coat and draped it over the back of a chair. "Sit," she said, nodding toward the couch. "You need to know what you're up against before the sun comes up." I obeyed, sinking into the couch. It smelled faintly of coffee and something sharper, maybe old cigarettes. I didn't care. Anything was better than the leather seat of my car. Rowan perched on the armrest across from me and spread out a file. She flipped through it with brisk, practiced hands, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Your ex, do you know how many people he owes? She asked without looking up. Some credit cards. Maybe a line of credit for the house. That's it, I think. She snorted. He owes 7 different lenders, 4 of them private, high interest, shady. He forged your signature on 2 of them. My stomach lurched. That can't be right. I never signed. I know you didn't, Rowan met my eyes. But proving that's going to take time. Right now, we use that to our advantage. He thinks you don't know. He thinks you're too soft to fight back. So tomorrow, you don't fight. Not at first. You play dumb. You let him corner himself. My mind reeled. I pictured his face, the smug grin, the casual way he'd told me to sleep in the car. I imagined what it would feel like to look him in the eye while he realized his entire illusion was unraveling. How do we start? I asked. Rowan leaned in, lowering her voice like we were sharing a campfire secret. We start by giving him exactly what he wants, your silence. You'll go back to the house tomorrow morning. Act humiliated. Apologize even. He'll let his guard down. He'll brag. He'll push you to sign something else. A new refinance, maybe. That's when we record everything. She pulled a small black device from her coat pocket and set it on the table. Wear it. Keep your phone off. If he tries to get physical, you walk away. But don't blow your cover until I say so. It felt like stepping into someone else's skin, a woman who could pull off subterfuge and trickery like it was nothing. But I reminded myself what was at stake, my freedom, my sanity, my future. I nodded. Okay, what about you? I'll be digging up the rest. He's been funneling money through fake shell accounts. Someone's been helping him. Jess, obviously, but there's more. He's made promises to people who will hurt him if he doesn't deliver. And you? I pressed. What's your stake in this? Rowan's eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat. Then she looked away. Let's just say I don't like seeing parasites like him get away with it. I have my reasons. The finality in her voice made me drop it. For now. She stood and grabbed a folded blanket from a crate in the corner, tossing it onto my lap. Get some sleep. I'll be up for a while. I watched her settle at the table, her eyes scanning the files like a predator watching its prey. I curled up on the couch, the blanket scratchy but warm, and let my eyelids drift shut. In the darkness behind my eyes, I pictured tomorrow, the taste of lies in my mouth, the moment my ex realized he'd built his throne out of sand. And me, no longer the woman in the car, but the woman walking straight through the front door like I owned the ground he stood on. And when the sun cracked the horizon, I would be ready. The hum of the street outside the warehouse never really stopped. Even when the night deepened into that hour before dawn when everything should have gone quiet, there was always the echo of distant trucks, the low mutter of engines, the creak of metal against metal somewhere out in the industrial maze. It was strange how that restless sound made it easier for me to sleep, or at least drift in and out of uneasy dreams. I woke to the smell of strong coffee and the sight of Rowan, silhouetted by the glow of an old desk lamp. She hadn't slept at all. Her hair had slipped free from its tight bun, hanging in loose waves around her face as she studied a laptop screen cluttered with open files and spreadsheets. For a few seconds I lay there on the battered couch, gathering the strength to sit up. The blanket she'd given me had slid to the floor, pooling around my feet. I felt like someone halfway between who I'd been and who I was about to become. Morning, I rasped, my voice rough from hours without speaking. Rowan didn't look up. Coffee's on the counter, help yourself. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and crossed the cold concrete floor to the little kitchenette in the corner. It was nothing more than a camping stove, a chipped mug and a battered old kettle, but it felt like luxury compared to the leather car seat that had been my bed the night before. As I poured myself a mug, I studied her again, the way she leaned in close to the screen, her fingers moving fast across the keyboard, her lips pressed into a thin line of concentration. She looked like she'd been doing this her whole life, like she had secrets buried deeper than I could imagine. Find anything? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She finally glanced at me, her eyes bloodshot but sharp as ever. Plenty. He's a lot sloppier than he thinks. Money trail's messy, paper trail's worse. He's used your name to cover almost every bad bet he's made. My stomach twisted around the sip of bitter coffee. How much do I owe? She shrugged. That's the thing. You don't. He does. But he's built it all on your credit, your assets. If you walk away without proving it, you're on the hook. I felt my pulse quicken. So I need him to confess. Out loud. Rowan smiled, just a flicker, more a baring of teeth than warmth. Exactly. And he will. Men like him always do when they think they've won. I sank into the creaking chair across from her, my hands wrapped tight around the mug. The steam curled up into my face, almost scalding, but I welcomed the sting. It kept me grounded, kept me from drowning in the rising tide of dread and anger. What's Jess's role in all this? I asked after a moment. Rowan's expression darkened. She clicked open a file and turned the screen toward me. There was Jess. That laugh, that too bright smile I'd seen last night while I stood in the shadows of my own life. But next to her was a scanned document, bank transfers, deposits, even a fake consulting contract with my name on it. She's his co-signer on some of the dirtier loans, Rowan said. She also handles the handoffs, cash drops, back-channel payments. She's more than just a fling, Marisol. She's his partner. And if we can't get him to crack, she's our insurance policy. I stared at Jess's face on the screen until it blurred. The woman who'd curled up on my couch, wearing my husband's shirt, sipping wine from my wedding crystal. I wanted to break something. My mug, the table, the whole filthy system that let him twist my life into his own safety net. But instead, I just nodded, forcing the fury down into a cold, hard knot in my chest. What do I do when I get there? Rowan closed the laptop with a decisive snap. You do what you do best. You play the good wife. You let him think you're defeated, desperate. He'll show you his cards if he thinks you're too broken to use them. And when he does, you record every word. I ran my thumb over the smooth curve of the mug, tracing the chipped rim. And you? I'll be nearby, watching, listening. If he tries anything, if Jess tries anything, I'll shut it down. But it has to be you in that room. You're the bait. And the hook. A shiver ran through me, but I didn't look away. What if he doesn't confess? Rowan leaned in, her eyes steady on mine. He will. He needs you more than you think. He's too deep to run, and he knows it. You're the only thing standing between him and the wolves. He'll give you the rope, and when he does, we'll hang him with it. We sat there for a long moment, the air between us thick with all the words we didn't say. Then Rowan pushed back from the table and grabbed her coat. Finish your coffee. We leave in 15. I did, as she said, my hands trembling only slightly as I drained the bitter dregs. When I rose to pull on my coat, I caught my reflection in the grimy window. Hair tangled, eyes ringed with exhaustion, but something fierce flickering just beneath the surface. I followed Rowan out into the dawn, the sky a bruised purple that promised a storm. We climbed into her car, the engine growling to life like it knew we were about to drive straight into the belly of the beast. As we pulled out onto the road, I closed my eyes and pictured the look on his face when he realized the woman he'd kicked into the shadows wasn't staying there. Not tonight. Not ever again. He thought he could bury me in the driveway. He never expected I'd crawl out of the darkness with a match in my hand. The house looked exactly the same, and that made it feel even more foreign. As Rowan parked the car at the end of the street, out of view but close enough, I stared through the windshield at the sunlit windows I'd once thought of as safe. Morning had washed the driveway in soft gold, but all I could see was the cold glint of the night before. The echo of his voice telling me to sleep in the car like I was an afterthought. Ready? Rowan asked, killing the engine. She turned to me, her hair pulled back in its no-nonsense bun again, her eyes sharp as cut glass. No, I admitted, but I'm going in anyway. She cracked a smile, the first real one I'd seen. Good girl, remember, you're not here to fight yet, play your role. Make him think you're begging. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the early morning air. The chill bit through my coat, waking me up more than any coffee ever could. With the small recording device tucked discreetly in my bra, I felt like I was carrying a live grenade. Fragile, dangerous, but exactly what I needed. I walked the short distance to the house on legs that felt strangely steady. Each step was a choice. I could have turned away. I could have run. But I didn't, not this time. Inside, the front door creaked open on its usual rusty hinge. I half expected to find them still asleep, tangled together on the couch, but when I stepped into the living room, it was empty. The wine glasses from last night abandoned on the coffee table, lipstick smudged on the rim of one. I heard them before I saw them, muffled voices coming from the kitchen. I followed the sound, every nerve in my body crackling with dread and grim purpose. He was there, leaning against the counter in his rumpled shirt, looking like a man who thought the world owed him an apology. Jess perched on a bar stool beside him, barefoot, hair tousled in a way that screamed staged vulnerability. When they saw me, he flinched, just a flicker, then pasted on a smirk that made my fists curl. "Well, look who decided to come home," he drawled. "Sleep well in your accommodations?" Jess giggled. It grated against my skin like sandpaper. I dropped my eyes, doing my best impression of a woman too beaten down to meet his gaze. I just want to talk." He raised his eyebrows, mocking surprise. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" I flinched back a step, making it look real. "I don't know what else to do. I can't sleep in the car forever." He pushed off the counter and stalked toward me. For a heartbeat, I wondered if he'd hit me, but instead he stopped just close enough that I could smell last night's whiskey on his breath. "You're finally learning," he said softly. "You do what I say, things stay easy. You want to stay here, you sign a few things. Help me get things straightened out." Behind him, Jess's eyes gleamed with triumph. She crossed her legs, swinging one foot like she was watching her favorite soap opera. I forced my hands to shake, my voice to tremble. What do I have to sign?" He grinned then. The grin that had once made me fall in love with him before I knew better. "Just some paperwork, refinancing, new accounts. You don't need to worry about the details. I'll handle that." I swallowed hard, trying to look as small as possible. "Okay, if it means I can stay." He chuckled, reaching out to pat my cheek like I was some obedient pet. "See? That's my girl. You always were good at knowing your place." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood, but I let the moment pass without flinching. Can I get changed first?" He stepped back, waving his hand dismissively. Yeah, upstairs. I'll have the papers ready by the time you're done." I turned and climbed the stairs, each step an act of sheer will. When I reached their bedroom, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing hard. My fingers brushed the tiny recorder. It was still there, catching every word, every confession, every piece of rope he'd just handed me. I crossed to the closet, pulled out a duffel bag, and stuffed in what I could. Clothes, old journals, the photo of my mother I'd kept hidden behind a stack of sweaters. Things that were mine and mine alone. Then I heard the creak of the floorboards outside the door. My breath caught in my throat. Jess's voice drifted through, low and mocking. "You think you're fooling him?" I turned slowly, my heart pounding. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He might be stupid enough to believe your pathetic act. I'm not." I forced my expression into a mask of confusion. "I don't know what you're—" She stepped closer, cutting me off with a sharp laugh. "Save it. You think you're clever, Marisol? You think you're going to take him down with your sad little good wife routine?" I stayed silent, letting her fill the silence with her own venom. "He'll destroy you," she sneered. "And when he does, I'll be right here picking up the pieces. Of him, of this house, of everything you thought you owned." I tilted my head, feigning a small, broken smile. "Funny, that's exactly what he said to me about you." Her eyes narrowed, the smirk slipping for a fraction of a second. "What did you say?" I shrugged, turning back to the duffel bag. "He said you're useful now. But once he's got what he needs, the new accounts, the clean money, you'll be gone, like the last one." It was a bluff, a dangerous one. But the way her face paled told me I'd struck something real. "You're lying," she hissed. "Am I?" I zipped the bag shut, slinging it over my shoulder. "You'd know better than me." Jess lunged, her hand snapping out to grab my arm. Her nails bit into my skin, but I didn't pull away. I leaned in close, letting her see the flicker of steel under my fear. "You think he'll protect you?" she spat. "He can't even protect himself." I smiled then, A real one this time. Good. I yanked free and pushed past her, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. Downstairs, he was waiting by the kitchen table, a folder spread open like a trap. He looked up as I approached, his grin wide and welcoming. "There she is," he said. All freshened up. "Come on, sit, let's get this done." I lowered myself into the chair across from him, the recorder humming like a heartbeat. He started explaining the forms, pointing to lines I was supposed to sign. His words blurred together, but I caught enough to know he'd just admitted every lie, every fake account, every debt he'd dumped in my name. By the time he handed me the pen, my hand was steady. "What's this last one for?" I asked, tilting my head like I didn't understand. "Just a formality," he said. "Protects me, us, from any liability." "And if I don't sign it?" I asked softly. His smile faded, replaced by a flash of something harder, meaner. "Don't start. You want to sleep in the car again? Or maybe you'd prefer the street." I leaned back, letting his threat hang in the air. "You know, you really should read the fine print yourself." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I slipped my phone from my pocket, switched off but ready, and placed it on the table. "This part where you say you forged my signature? The fake loans? The shell accounts? That's all on tape." His face drained of color. "What the hell is this?" I stood, my knees steady, my voice clear. "This is me taking my life back." Jess appeared in the doorway behind him, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. You recorded me?" he sputtered. I met his eyes, no longer the good wife, no longer the woman in the car. Every word. The front door creaked open behind me and Rowan stepped in, her presence a wave of calm that settled over the storm I'd just unleashed. She locked eyes with him, then with Jess, her smile as cold as winter. "Show's over." And as the three of us stood there, the liar, the traitor, and the woman they'd both underestimated, I realized the driveway would never be my prison again. It was my launch pad. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe! Now back to the story. The room seemed smaller now, the walls pressing in around his outrage like a vice. He stood there at the kitchen table, his mouth opening and closing, searching for the right lie to patch over what he'd just confessed. But the words wouldn't come. Not with Rowan leaning against the doorframe, arms folded, her expression cool as a glacier. Jess hovered at his shoulder like a furious shadow. She was no longer the purring mistress. Her eyes snapped with something feral now, a woman realizing too late that the fantasy she'd been sold was nothing but rot beneath the gloss. I could feel the recorder pressing against my ribs, each second of dead silence another nail in the coffin he'd built for himself. He knew it too. The way his hand twitched near the pile of forged papers, the way his jaw clenched when he looked at Rowan, he knew it was over, and he was scrambling for any thread to pull. Rowan straightened, stepping forward until she stood beside me. "It's a neat little operation you had here," she said, her tone conversational like we were discussing the weather. "The shell companies, the ghost signatures, the offshore funneling. Did you really think no one would notice?" He flinched as if the words had weight. "You can't prove any of that." Rowan smiled, slow and sharp. "Oh, we can. And we will." Jess rounded on him, her voice slicing through the tension like a blade. "You said it was safe. You said she'd never find out." He spun on her, spitting venom. "You're the one who couldn't keep your mouth shut. Enough!" I snapped. The word came out before I could stop it, louder than I'd ever heard my own voice. They froze, both of them, turning to me like I was the eye of a hurricane they hadn't seen coming. I stepped closer, putting the table between us. "You told me to sleep in the car so you could play house with your mistress. You forged my name, emptied my accounts, bet my future on your pathetic schemes. And you still thought you'd win." He sneered, but the fear behind it made it weak. "What are you going to do, Marisol? Run to the cops? You think they'll believe you over me?" Rowan barked a laugh. "Oh, they'll believe her. When she hands them everything, the audio, the contracts, the bank statements you were too arrogant to hide." Jess's voice dropped to a hiss. "You think they'll stop with him? You think they won't come for you too?" Rowan's eyes glittered, cold and unflinching. "Let them come. I took a breath and turned to face him fully. This house, the car, my name, you turned them into your playground. I'm done being your shelter. He lurched forward, his hands slamming on the table so hard the stack of papers slid onto the floor. You ungrateful, after everything I did for you. I didn't flinch. You didn't do it for me, you did it for you, and now you get to live with what that costs. Rowan nodded once, then tilted her head toward the front door. Time's up. He glanced between us, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. You can't just walk out. But that's exactly what I did. I turned on my heel, feeling the weight of the house behind me, the ghosts of a life I'd thought I'd built on love. Each step was heavy, but it was mine. Rowan's footsteps fell into sync beside me, the two of us stepping into the morning sunlight that flooded the porch. At the curb, a car idled, a different one, black and nondescript, Rowan's backup. She opened the passenger door for me like a bodyguard escorting royalty, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel the power in that. He shouted something from the doorway, his voice ragged, but I didn't turn back. I climbed in, slammed the door shut, and watched as the woman who had slept in her own car became the woman who was never coming back. Rowan got behind the wheel, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. He'll run, she said. They always do. Let him, I murmured. He'll never outrun the truth. She shot me a sidelong glance. And you? Where will you run, Marisol? I traced my fingertip along the edge of the seat. Not away, forward. We pulled away from the house that had been my prison, the tires crunching on gravel like bones underfoot. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Everything I needed was already ahead of me. Back at Rowan's safe house, the hours blurred. She made calls, lawyers, accountants, contacts whose names she didn't share, but whose results spoke for themselves. I watched documents become weapons, watched my own name transform from a signature on forged debt into a banner of my freedom. And through it all, I stayed awake. I wanted to feel every heartbeat of this reclamation. Every piece of the woman I'd buried beneath compromise and fear clawed its way to the surface. The good wife was dead. The woman who owned the car, the house, her name, her future, had just been born. Rowan found me dozing in the corner near dawn. She nudged my shoulder, her face softer than I'd ever seen it. You did good, she said simply. I blinked awake, my voice raw. Is it done? She hesitated, then nodded. Almost. You're going to need to testify, probably more than once. He'll fight. Maybe he'll try to flip it on you. But the truth is stronger than any spin he can buy. I sat up, feeling the ache in my bones like a badge of honor. Good, let him try. Rowan grinned, that fierce glint back in her eyes. That's the spirit. I stood, my legs trembling but sure. I glanced at the dusty window that looked out over the sleeping city. Somewhere out there he was packing his lies into a suitcase, trying to outrun the avalanche he'd started. Let him run. Let him learn how small the world gets when you have nowhere left to hide. Rowan's phone buzzed on the table. She answered it with a curt, "Yeah?" Then she paused, her eyes flicking to me. He tried to drain the last offshore account, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. Too late. It's frozen. I felt something deep in my chest unclench, the final piece, the final lock snapping shut on his freedom. What now? I asked. Rowan pocketed her phone and clapped a hand on my shoulder. Now, you decide who you want to be when the dust settles. You're not his victim anymore, Marisol. You're the one holding the pen. I let the words sink in. Outside, the city was waking up, trucks rumbling down the street, the sunrise catching the edges of broken warehouse windows. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what daylight would bring. I was the woman who had slept in her car, the car they never really owned, the life they never really controlled, and now I was driving my own way out. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The sky was an endless sheet of slate when Rowan's car pulled up to the curb of my temporary apartment. I hadn't even bothered unpacking the boxes that had arrived that morning, stacked like bricks against the walls of the too-quiet living room. But I didn't care about decor. I cared about distance, about breathing air that didn't reek of betrayal and old wine. Rowan killed the engine and turned to me, her expression unreadable in the thin dawn light. "You sure you're ready for this?" I stared at the building's dull brick facade. "Not really, but that's never stopped me before." She laughed, a short bark that carried a little warmth this time. "Atta girl." Inside, the apartment still smelled like fresh paint and industrial carpet glue. I stepped over half-unpacked boxes and dropped my bag by the window that looked out over the city. For the first time in days, the view didn't make me feel small. It made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something bigger than him, bigger than the life he'd tried to keep me in. Rowan followed me inside, dropping a manila folder on the coffee table. "It's all in there. His accounts, the offshore trails, copies of the recordings. If he tries to flip the narrative, you'll bury him with his own words." I ran my fingers across the folder's battered edge. It felt like holding a blade. "You think he'll come after me?" Rowan shrugged. "He might, but he's out of money, out of friends. Men like him don't know how to be powerless. That's his weakness, Marisol. Yours is that you still think you're fragile." I bristled. "I'm not fragile." She gave me a look. "Then stop standing here like you're waiting for someone's permission to breathe. He's gone. You're free. Act like it." I clenched my fists at my sides. Rowan wasn't gentle, but she was right. The last few days had felt like pulling my own skin off. Raw, vulnerable, but necessary. Now it was time to let new skin grow back. Thicker this time. She checked her phone, scanning a text that made her mouth twitch. "He's holed up in that hotel downtown, the same one he used to take her. They think he's planning to skip town tonight." She looked up. "We're gonna make sure he doesn't." I met her eyes. "We?" Rowan's smile was all teeth. "You didn't think I'd let you have all the fun, did you?" I should have been scared, planning to confront him one last time, to make sure the final nail went in straight. But instead, all I felt was a strange, simmering calm. He'd made me a prisoner in my own driveway. Now I'd watch him try to outrun the mess he made, and I'd be the one waiting at every locked door. That night, the city felt like a different world. Rowan and I parked 2 blocks from the hotel, slipping through back alleys while the neon lights hummed like a promise. The plan was simple: catch him alone, corner him with the evidence, and push him to admit the rest. No more pretending, no more safe illusions. In the dim glow of the lobby, I spotted him first. He looked smaller than he ever had in our kitchen, hunched over a whiskey at the bar, his eyes darting to the exit every few minutes. Jess was gone. His phone was dark on the counter beside him. No cavalry was coming. Rowan touched my arm. "Your show." I stepped forward, my heels clicking across the marble floor like gunfire. He turned, and for a moment, his eyes sparked with that same controlling heat. But it faded when he saw Rowan standing behind me, arms crossed like a sentinel. "Marisol," he said, his voice a low growl. "What do you want?" I slid into the seat beside him, my voice calm and clear. "I want you to say it. I want you to tell me how you forged my name, how you stole my credit, how you thought you'd get away with it while I slept in my own car." His lip curled. "You can't prove." Rowan dropped a stack of documents on the bar with a slap that made the bartender glance over, then look away fast. "Try me." He glanced at her, then at me. His shoulders sagged. "So what now? You turn me in? You think anyone will care?" "They'll care," I said softly, "because you made me think I was nothing. And now you're going to tell the truth, right here, in front of her, in front of anyone who asks." He sneered, but I saw the panic flicker in his eyes. "And if I don't?" Rowan leaned down until her face was inches from his. "Then we bury you in so many lawsuits you'll wish you were in prison instead." Silence swallowed the bar. He glanced around, but no one would meet his gaze. He was nothing now. No power, no mistress, no home. Just a man cornered by the woman he'd underestimated. He laughed then, a hollow sound. "You think you've won." I let a slow smile curl across my lips. No, I know I have. When we stepped back out into the city, I felt taller, lighter. The night wrapped around me like a cloak I'd chosen for myself. Rowan caught my eye and tipped her head toward the skyline. "So what now?" I didn't hesitate. Now I drive, wherever I want, however far I want. and no one gets to tell me where to sleep ever again." Rowan's grin was fierce, proud. "Good, you earned it." And as we walked away from the last place he'd ever hold power over me, I felt the world stretch wide and waiting, the keys to my own future jingling in my pocket like a promise I'd finally made good on. To be continued. The next morning, I woke to silence. The good kind. The kind that feels earned. Sunlight spilled across the cheap carpet of my new apartment, turning the bare walls into a canvas of soft gold. I lay there for a moment, staring up at the ceiling and letting the truth settle in my bones. He was gone, and this place, sparse and undecorated as it was mine. Rowan called just before noon. "He's lawyered up," she said, voice sharp but satisfied. "But we got what we need. The DA's office wants you to come in tomorrow to give your official statement." I rubbed sleep from my eyes, feeling the tangle of exhaustion and relief twist together. "I'll be ready." "You always were," she said. "You just forgot for a while." The rest of the day unfolded like a test I knew all the answers to. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen, brewed so strong it could melt a spoon. I opened every box and set my clothes in drawers, not because they matched or looked pretty, but because they were mine, untainted by the memory of his hands folding them into neat rows while he plotted to sell me out. Around midday, I sat at my new kitchen table, a battered piece Rowan's fixer friend had loaned me, and opened the folder she'd given me, pages and pages of proof, the signatures he'd forged, the accounts he'd drained, the shell companies with my name tacked on like a sticky note he thought no one would ever peel away. It was all there, laid bare, no more shadows. I traced my finger over the lines of ink, felt the rage simmer, and then let it go. I didn't need to cling to it anymore. It had done its job, woken me up, shoved me forward. Now I wanted something different. Something I'd never really claimed for myself before. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't need to slam doors or raise a voice. The kind that stands when everything else falls apart. By sunset, I had a plan. Rowan was right. The DA's case was strong, but we both knew how slippery men like him could be. I wouldn't feel safe until every door he could crawl through was slammed shut and bolted. So that night, I met Rowan at her safe house, the warehouse that had become my war room. She was already there, sifting through another stack of files when I walked in. She looked up, eyes bright with that wolfish spark I'd grown to trust. "He's trying to cut a deal," she said. "Claims he was coerced, that you were part of it." I barked a laugh that tasted like iron. Let him try. He'll hang himself with that lie. Rowan leaned back in her chair, studying me like a chess piece she'd just watched come to life. "You know, I've seen plenty of women in your shoes. Most of them run back, beg for forgiveness, settle for hush money, and pretend it never happened." "And me?" I asked. She smiled. A real one this time, not the sharp-edged grin she used on enemies. "You didn't run, you didn't break, you just changed." I sank onto the couch, tucking one leg under me. "You ever get tired of doing this?" Rowan tilted her head. "What? Cleaning up after liars? Teaching people like you how to stand on their own?" "Yeah." Her gaze drifted past me to the warehouse's grimy windows, where city lights flickered like distant campfires. "I used to. But every now and then, I meet someone who makes it worth it. Someone who reminds me why I keep swinging the hammer." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just let the silence settle between us. A silence that wasn't empty. It was full of all the things we'd survived to get here. Later, when the clock ticked past midnight, Rowan stood and pulled a battered folder from her duffel bag. "One more thing before tomorrow." She handed it to me, and I flipped it open. Inside was an affidavit. Her affidavit laying out every piece of the puzzle. How she'd tracked the accounts, how she'd traced the forged signatures, how she'd caught him slipping up. Her signature sat at the bottom, bold and certain. "If he tries to spin this on you," she said, "they'll have my word to cut him off at the knees." A lump rose in my throat. Small but stubborn. "Why do you care so much?" Rowan's eyes flickered, and for once she looked almost shy. "Because someone once did the same for me. And because I'm tired of watching good people get buried by bastards who think loyalty is a currency to spend." I closed the folder and set it on the table between us. You ever think about what happens when this is over? She arched an eyebrow. You mean besides him in prison and you driving off into the sunset? Yeah, I said, smiling despite myself. What if there's more than revenge? Rowan chuckled. Then you get to find out. She clapped a hand on my shoulder, her touch warm and heavy like an anchor. Go home, sleep. Tomorrow you testify, and then you get the rest of your life back. I left the warehouse with the city humming around me. The night air smelled cleaner than it had in weeks. I let it fill my lungs, my veins, my head, a reminder that I wasn't the woman he'd told to sleep in her own car. I was the woman who would never again let anyone tell her where she belonged. Back in my tiny apartment, I stood at the window for a long time, watching headlights snake through the streets below. My reflection stared back at me, hair tangled, eyes shadowed with too many sleepless nights. But behind it, I could see the first shape of the woman I was becoming. Not fragile, not broken, not a discarded afterthought on a driveway. The woman who owned the car and the road ahead. To be continued. The courthouse was older than I expected. Its stone columns loomed over me like silent witnesses, the morning sun catching the cracks in the marble steps as I climbed them one by one. Each step felt like an echo of every moment I'd been told to stand down, stay quiet, play nice. Each step felt like a nail in the coffin of that obedient version of myself. Rowan was already there when I reached the top landing. She leaned against the railing, a plain folder tucked under her arm, her posture relaxed but her eyes locked onto every person who passed us. When she spotted me, she straightened, flicking her cigarette into a metal trash can. You sleep? She asked. I shook my head. Doesn't matter. She snorted, a half-smile tugging at her mouth. That's my girl. Inside, the hallway smelled of stale coffee and floor polish. I clutched my statement, the pages trembling only slightly in my grip. It felt unreal, standing here with this thin stack of paper. Proof of his betrayal. My signature forged so many times it looked like a stranger's handwriting. But now it was real. And now it was mine. A clerk showed us into a small waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rowan took the chair beside mine, her knee bouncing with barely contained energy. I sat perfectly still, staring at the scuffed linoleum, fighting the temptation to rehearse every word in my head one more time. I didn't want to sound polished. I wanted to sound true. A door creaked open. Marisol Hartwell? My name, my real name, my full name, filled the tiny space like a spark. I stood, straightening my blazer, feeling the recorder Rowan had insisted I wear like a talisman under my collar. Inside, the DA's office was surprisingly ordinary. A round table, mismatched chairs, a pot of burnt coffee that no one touched. The assistant DA, a woman named Klein, gestured for me to sit. You ready? She asked, her tone all business. Yes, I said, and I meant it. She slid a glass of water toward me, whenever you're comfortable. I started talking. About the first loan I hadn't known about the second and the third. About the credit cards that appeared like weeds, the investments he'd made behind my back, the way he'd looked me in the eye every night and told me everything was fine. The words tumbled out faster than I expected. Some parts hurt, the car keys in my hand, the cold seat under my thighs that first night in the driveway. The laughter I'd heard through the window while I sat there pretending not to care. Klein didn't interrupt. She just took notes, her pen scratching a record that no one could twist into something else. When I finished, Rowan handed over her folder. You have the recordings, you have the paper trail, and you have the people he tried to charm who are more than ready to say what they saw. Klein nodded. It's solid. His lawyer will push for a deal, but he doesn't have much leverage left. I looked at her, my voice low. I don't want him to disappear into some plea deal. I want him to stand up there and say it. I want him to tell everyone what he did. Rowan's hand found my shoulder, a steady weight. He will. Hours later, when we stepped back out into the courtyard, the sun was already dipping toward late afternoon. I blinked at the light, feeling the weight of the courthouse doors swing shut behind me like a stone falling into place. How do you feel? Rowan asked. I turned to her, breathing in the crisp air that didn't taste like fear anymore. Like I get to decide where I go next. She grinned, tucking her hands into her coat pockets. Then let's talk about that. We walked along the sidewalk, past a food cart selling burnt hot dogs, past the courthouse steps where I just told the truth no one could bury again. Rowan's phone buzzed, but she ignored it. For once, she was just here with me, not 3 steps ahead. I don't want to just survive, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I want to build something that's mine, not just an apartment, a life. Rowan nodded. So do it. You're free now. I smiled. Maybe I am. We stopped at a corner. Rowan turned to me, her eyes serious. You know he'll try to get in your head again. If he calls, if he sends his lawyer. He won't, I said, cutting her off. And if he does, he'll hear my silence. Rowan laughed, sharp and genuine. Good. That's the Marisol I was hoping to meet. We parted ways at the corner. I watched her walk off into the city shadows, the woman who'd handed me the keys to my own escape when all I'd seen was a locked car door. When she was gone, I stood there alone for the first time in a long time and didn't feel abandoned. Back at the apartment, I opened every window and let the dusk roll in. The night air smelled like new paint and possibility. I sat on the floor, my back against the bare wall, the folder of evidence at my feet. I didn't need it anymore, not tonight. Tonight, I needed to remember what it felt like to be unburdened. I fell asleep there, the city humming through the open glass, my dreams restless but not hopeless for the first time in what felt like forever. Tomorrow there would be headlines. Tomorrow the lawyers would circle. But tonight was mine. And tomorrow I'd decide where to drive next. To be continued. I stood at my tiny kitchen counter the next morning, the cheap laminate cold under my palms as I braced myself against the memory of the courthouse. It hadn't left me yet. The echo of my own voice in that small, stale room, the way his face had flickered on the screen when they played the recording of his threat. He couldn't bury it anymore, neither could I. A knock at the door startled me. For a split second, my pulse kicked up, old instincts making me flinch. But I pushed that fear down as I crossed the apartment and cracked the door open. It was Rowan. No coat today. Just her faded jeans and that worn leather jacket that made her look like she belonged to another time. She held up 2 paper coffee cups in greeting. Brought the good stuff, she said, brushing past me into the kitchen like she owned the place. You didn't answer my calls. I turned my phone off, I said, taking one of the cups. The warmth seeped into my fingers, grounding me. I needed quiet. Rowan leaned against the counter, her eyes tracking me like she was trying to read the pages of a book only half written. You get it? The quiet? I nodded. For a little while. She studied me, and now? I set the coffee down and exhaled. Now I want noise, the right kind. Rowan's mouth curved into that sly grin that meant trouble for someone else, and salvation for me. You ready to make a mess? I already did, I said, my laugh sharp and honest. Now I'm ready to build. She pushed away from the counter and reached into her back pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper, a printout with names, contact info, rough numbers scribbled in the margins. He's still scrambling, she said, tapping the paper, trying to salvage whatever scraps he can. He's calling in favors, telling anyone who'll listen that you turned on him, that you're unstable. I barked a bitter laugh. Let him talk, I'm done speaking for him. Rowan pointed at one line on the page. A name I hadn't seen before. This guy. He's been laundering for him for months. Offshore shells, fake invoices, all under your forged signature. We can freeze him out, but it'll take a statement. From you. I didn't hesitate. Where? She shrugged. Meet me at his office tonight. Late. He thinks we'll sneak in and scare him. But you, standing in his doorway, calm as ice? That'll scare him more than any threat I could make. I nodded, the old fear there, but distant, like an echo of someone I used to be. Fine. Rowan's grin softened. You know, I've been doing this a long time, Marisol. People talk about vengeance like it's fire. Bright, wild. But the ones who win? They make it cold, controlled. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She could see it in my eyes. The man's office was all glass and sleek metal, perched on the 22nd floor of a downtown building that smelled like fresh-cut money. Rowan and I slipped past security with ease, forged badges, a practiced smile. When she pushed open the door to his inner sanctum, I stepped in first. He looked up from his desk, blinking behind thin wire-rimmed glasses. His suit probably cost more than my rent for a year, but the way his hands fumbled for the tablet on his desk told me exactly how much power he really had. "Miss Hartwell," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "this is highly irregular." "Save it," I cut in. "I know what you've been doing. How many accounts did he promise you? How many signatures did you forge for him in my name?" His lips twitched, trying to shape a lie. Rowan stepped up behind me, her hand resting casually on my shoulder. The silent threat was enough. He wilted. "I'm not the only one," he stammered. "Everyone does it. He said you'd never find out." "And you believed him," I said softly. "You believed he could keep me in the car while he spent my life like loose change." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Rowan leaned in, her voice ablade. "She's not asking for your excuses. She's here so you can sign your own confession." He hesitated, then reached for the pen. I watched his hand tremble. When it was done, I picked up the paper, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my bag. My name, my real name, sealed his ruin, not his lies. As we stepped back into the hallway, Rowan exhaled a low whistle. "You're terrifying, you know that?" I shrugged, my voice low. "I learned from the best." She clapped my back as we waited for the elevator. "So, you've got the car, the house is gone. The debts are pinned on him and his little circle. What's next?" The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside and met her eyes, the steel in my spine no longer borrowed from her but mine alone. "I don't sleep in the car anymore. I drive it. Anywhere I want." She grinned as the doors closed. "Damn right." Down on the street, the city stretched out before me, noisy, bright, and absolutely mine for the taking. The first real rain in weeks came the night before the hearing. I sat by the window in my small apartment, the glass cold against my forehead as sheets of water streaked the city lights into watercolor blurs. Somewhere across town, he was holed up in a cheap motel, pacing the threadbare carpet, calling the last few, quote, friends who hadn't already turned their backs on him. But none of them could save him now. The next morning, Rowan picked me up in a car that wasn't mine, a rental, untraceable. But she handed me my old keys anyway, the ones he used to think he owned. I turned them over in my hand, feeling their weight like a medal I'd earned the hard way. "Ready?" she asked, voice calm, eyes sharp. "As I'll ever be," I said. We didn't talk much on the drive. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a low gray fog that settled over the courthouse like a curtain. Inside, the hallway buzzed with reporters and whispers. I caught my name more than once. The woman who'd slept in her car while her husband sold her life out from under her. The woman who didn't stay down. In the courtroom, I took my seat behind the glass pane that separated me from him. He looked thinner than I remembered, his hair unkempt, his tie askew like he'd pulled it on without caring how it sat on his collar. His eyes met mine once, a flicker of recognition, of old habits dying hard, but I didn't look away. The hearing dragged, lawyers argued. His attorney tried every trick in the book, loopholes, counterclaims, half-baked threats. But each time, the mountain of evidence crushed the excuses. Rowan sat beside me, her notes in neat columns, her foot tapping the tile every time the other side stumbled. When they played the recordings, his voice telling me to sleep in the car so Jess could have my bed, his signature on forged documents, he winced. The jury didn't. After the judge gavelled for a recess, Rowan turned to me. "He'll take a deal. He'll beg you to let him crawl away." "Good," I said. "Let him beg." We stood in the corridor while his lawyer scurried over, a sweat sheen on his forehead. "Ms. Hartwell, if we could just discuss." Rowan cut him off. "No. She's not interested in discussion." I leaned in, my voice low. "Tell him he should have thought about mercy when he told me to sleep in the car." The lawyer swallowed hard and disappeared back into the conference room. Rowan barked out a laugh, the sound echoing down the marble hallway. When it was all over, when the final plea was entered and the judge scheduled the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into sunlight that felt like a brand new country. The keys were still in my pocket. This time, I wasn't holding them like a memory. I was holding them like a promise. Rowan stood by the curb, arms crossed. that grin of hers back in place. "You ready to let this be done?" I shook my head. "Not done, started." We drove. Nowhere in particular. Just the city roads rolling out like an invitation. Rowan's rental car hummed beneath us, but all I could think about was my own. The car that was truly mine, the road that was wide open. "You ever think about what's next for you?" I asked her, my head resting back against the seat. She smirked. "I'll find the next mess to clean up. That's what I do." "And me?" I asked. She glanced over, her grin softening. "You drive, you don't look back. And when you hit the next storm, you don't park it and wait for it to pass. You push through." We pulled up to my apartment building just as the sun dipped behind the skyline. Rowan didn't follow me inside this time. She leaned across the console, tugging my old keys from my palm, then pressed them back into my hand. "Yours?" she said. "Always was." I nodded, my throat tight, words caught somewhere between gratitude and something bigger. I got out and stood on the sidewalk until her car slipped into traffic and vanished around the corner. Inside, the apartment felt different. Not a hiding place, but a starting line. I stood at the window, the keys clutched tight in my fist, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. He'd tried to keep me small enough to fit in the driver's seat of a car parked in my own driveway, but he'd failed. I didn't just own the car, I owned the road now. Every mile of it. Tomorrow, I'd drive it somewhere I wanted to go. No rearview mirror needed. The last time I stood in my old driveway, I was a ghost in my own life. Now, months later, I parked my car, at the curb just to prove to myself that I never had to sleep behind that wheel again. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots, the familiar shape of the house looming behind the chain-link fence, like a hollow shell of who I used to be. It sat empty now, waiting for a new name on the deed. A real name, not a forgery scribbled in the dark by a man who thought he'd never be caught. The windows were boarded up. The lawn, once my pride and his afterthought, had grown wild. I ran my fingers along the hood of my car, the paint smooth and warm under the mid-morning sun, then looked back at the house one last time. Rowan was waiting on the sidewalk, her arms folded over a folder stamped with the final foreclosure paperwork. She raised an eyebrow when I didn't move. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. Better than good. She handed me the folder, her fingers brushing mine. "This is it, the last nail. Once you sign this, it's officially over." I flipped it open and scrawled my name at the bottom. Not the forged loops he'd practiced to sign my life away. Not the trembling script I'd used when I first stood up to him. This time, it was strong, deliberate, mine. When it was done, I shut the folder and pressed it into Rowan's hands. She tucked it under her arm like a war trophy. "So," she said, her grin crooked and sharp, "what now?" I leaned back against my car, staring up at the wide, open sky. "I've got miles to put behind me. I've got places to see that don't know his name." Rowan tipped her head. "And when you get there?" I shrugged. "I park my car. I open the door. And I sleep inside, in a bed I paid for, in a place I chose." She barked a laugh, the sound rolling down the block. "You really don't get tired of surprising me." "Good," I said, my smile soft but fierce. "Then you'll stick around." She reached out, squeezed my shoulder once, the same way she had the first night she found me curled up behind the steering wheel, too numb to feel the cold seeping into my bones. "You ever need me again? You know where to find me." I looked her dead in the eye. "I won't, but I'll call you anyway." She shook her head, laughter rumbling low in her throat. "Go on then, before you change your mind." I walked around to the driver's side door, pausing with my hand on the handle. The street was so quiet now, like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. I slid behind the wheel. Not to sleep, not to hide, but to go. The engine purred to life like it had been waiting for my permission. I watched Rowan in the rearview mirror as I pulled away. She lifted 2 fingers in a lazy salute, the last piece of my old war falling away as the block disappeared behind me. I didn't have a destination, not exactly, just the freedom to go until the tank ran dry, and I decided to fill it up again. I rolled the windows down, let the wind whip through my hair. The city gave way to open highway, bright signs, endless sky, no more locked doors or shut windows. I caught my reflection in the side mirror once. Eyes clear, mouth curved in a smile I didn't have to fake. I didn't look like the woman who'd been exiled to her own driveway. I looked like the woman who knew the price of silence, and who'd never pay it again. Somewhere past the city limits, I pulled off at a rest stop, just to stand under the sun, to feel the hum of my car's engine cooling under my palm. I stretched my arms wide, like I could grab every mile of road waiting for me. Before I got back in, I whispered to the sky, not for him to hear, not for Rowan, not for the lawyers or the jury or the woman I used to be, just for me. Never again. I slammed the door, turned the key, and pulled back onto the highway. My highway, my rules, my name. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.